Greetings and welcome back to Human Physiology. Let's talk a little bit about metabolism. So, a fundamental principle that you probably talked about a lot in your general biology class, however long ago that was, all living things need energy, whether it's multicellular organisms like us, unicellular organisms like bacteria. Living things need energy, right? We need energy in order to function. So when you're talking about an organism's metabolism, what you're really talking about is the sum total of every single type of chemical reaction that is happening inside all the different cells, or just one cell if you're talking about a unicellular organism. So metabolism, or a metabolic reaction, is kind of a general broad term. So let's narrow that down just a little bit. So catabolic reactions are the type of reactions that tend to break down very complex molecules into much more simple molecules. And all the while, these catabolic reactions are going to release energy in order for that energy to be harnessed and used elsewhere. So usually when we're talking about humans, catabolic reactions are the type that break down food molecules. So when you eat a meal, you have eaten protein, carbohydrates, and fats, very large, very complex molecules that contain a lot of chemical bonds. So your cells are going to break a bunch of chemical bonds, release the energy that is contained within, and you are going to be able to harness that energy to put to use elsewhere. And in the meanwhile, those complex food molecules have been broken down into carbon dioxide and water, two very simple and small low-energy molecules. So really the whole purpose of eating food, really catabolic reactions, is to release that energy that is contained within the complex molecules so that we can use that energy for other things. Speaking of things that require energy, that is going to be what anabolic reactions are all about. So anabolic reactions are kind of like catabolic reactions, just run in reverse. So if catabolic reactions convert complex molecules into simple ones, anabolic reactions are going to start with very simple molecules and then connect them together to build a very complex molecule. But as you can imagine, building something is going to require energy, whereas breaking something, deconstructing something, is going to release energy. So in order for an anabolic reaction to occur, something like protein synthesis, in order for something like that to occur, an energy cost has to be paid. You have to provide energy in order for an assembly reaction, an anabolic reaction, to occur. Well, it turns out that catabolic and anabolic reactions are going to happen simultaneously. When you eat food, you digest your proteins and carbs and lipids, you're releasing the energy, and as soon as that energy is released and packaged, we use that energy to power all the anabolic reactions that need to occur. So again, neither one of these reactions really exists in a vacuum. They are coexisting. The catabolic reactions exist so that the anabolic reactions can occur. So one way that I really like to think about this in terms of kind of figuring out the whole, okay, which is which, what does energy have to do with this? Think of a ball rolling down a ramp or rolling down a hill. So the way I like to think of it is the top of the ramp represents a high energy state. So high energy molecules like the food that we eat, the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates that we love to eat, those are high energy molecules. So if you're starting with those molecules, picture a ball starting at the top of a ramp. Okay, so because these large complex molecules tend to have a lot of energy, a catabolic reaction is going to be one in which we roll the ball downhill. So we start at a high energy state, and just naturally, this ball is going to want to roll downhill with the force of gravity. So we go from high energy to low energy, and we can harness or harvest the difference in energy between the two states. The energy that is released as the ball rolls downhill is going to be harnessed by the body and by the cells. Now, if you want to look at it in terms of anabolic reactions, really it's the same thing, except in this case, since we're starting with simple low energy molecules, In this case, the ball would start at the bottom of the ramp. So imagine a ball just resting at the bottom of a ramp. If you just leave the ball alone, is the ball ever going to go up the ramp? No, it's not. So anabolic reactions are what you would call non-spontaneous. They are never, ever, ever going to happen if you don't give the ball a little push. And the push we're talking about here is the energy cost that has to be paid in order to push that ball uphill, to start with low energy molecules and push it uphill until those molecules become more complex high energy molecules. So we've been dealing mostly in metaphors so far, so let's actually talk turkey in terms of what the cell actually does with energy. So we've talked about how catabolic reactions involve the breakdown of complex molecules and the harnessing of energy. Okay, well, what do we do with that energy when we harness it? Well, your cells kind of tend to store energy like a battery. It's not a perfect metaphor, but you'll kind of see what I mean here in just a second. So the nice thing about a battery is that you can charge a battery when it's not in use, when you're not using it for anything. So when you go to bed at night, probably you charge your phone so that it gets charged up so you'll be ready to use it the next day. When you need to use your phone or something else, you deplete the battery, and that battery power is used to power certain functions. So surfing the web, making phone calls, sending texts, that all requires battery power in order for your phone to do those things. So your cells are kind of the same way. We eat food, we break down complex molecules, we harness the energy, and we store up that energy until an anabolic reaction needs that energy, and then we start depleting that energy. So if anything is going to be the battery in this metaphor, it's going to be this high energy molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or just ATP. So hopefully you remember from general biology and cellular respiration, when you eat your food and you start breaking it down, those broken down molecules like glucose or fatty acids or things of that nature, they become substrates for cellular respiration, which mostly occurs inside the mitochondria. So the whole purpose of cellular respiration is to make lots and lots and lots and lots of this molecule here, ATP. So these two red arrows that I have provided here represent very, very high energy bonds. If we break those bonds, we can release a very large amount of energy. But if we form those bonds, we have a way of storing a vast amount of energy for later use. So this is why I use the battery in this metaphor. When we make ATP, we store that energy from the catabolic reactions in those high energy bonds. And then when an anabolic reaction comes along that needs that energy, we can break those high energy bonds, expend our ATP, and provide the energy necessary to power those anabolic reactions that tend to build things up. So again, catabolic reactions release energy, and this energy is packaged into ATP molecules. And then when it comes time for an anabolic reaction that requires energy input, usually this energy is going to come from the same ATP that was produced from the catabolic reactions. We break down the ATP, release the energy, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got the energy you need to power that anabolic reaction. So let's go ahead and finish off kind of what we're talking about here. This doesn't necessarily have anything directly to do with metabolism, but we'll go ahead and kind of finish things off before our next topic. So responsiveness and movement. So responsiveness refers to an organism's ability to adjust to changes in internal and external environments. Kind of going to lead into our discussion on homeostasis. So this can include both conscious and unconscious behaviors. So things that we're both like things that we can respond to based on the things that we see, the things that we hear. If you see a grizzly bear, you're going to want to run away from it. So that would be a conscious behavior, but unconscious behaviors like sweating when it gets really hot, shivering when it gets really cold, those are unconscious behaviors, right? So both of those kind of fall under the umbrella of responsiveness. And then movement is going to refer to several different things. So one way refers to kind of what we're familiar with, right? Using muscle groups to move the skeleton around. So moving your hands, moving your arms, moving your legs. But it can also refer to the movement of individual cells and molecules. Again, things that you're not necessarily aware of. So just to give you an example, kind of at this picture here, we've got 3 different marathon runners here. So marathon, 26.2 miles, so that's quite a race. So these runners, which it looks like they're at about mile 18 here based on the picture, they have probably driven up their body temperature, so they are sweating to keep their body temperature down. Again, that's another example of responsiveness. They're using their muscles to move their bodies as they run to the goal, and they're also using the muscles in their thoracic cavities to move air in and out of their lungs. So that movement of air kind of falls under that movement umbrella. It's not just about moving your body, it's also moving materials in and out of your body as well. Development and reproduction. So development includes all the changes that occur in the human body from the time of fertilization to the end of life, right? So that seems pretty obvious. So again, something that I'm sure you learned in general biology is that when you were conceived, when a human or when a mammal is conceived, this starts with the fertilization process. So a sperm and an egg join together to form a diploid one-cell zygote. So diploid meaning 2 copies of every chromosome, 1 copy of chromosomes from mom, 1 copy of chromosomes from dad. So at one point, at the earliest point in your development, you were a single cell. You're about 30 trillion cells now, but at one point you were one single cell. You were a zygote. So when this zygote is formed, it is then going to enter the cell cycle and start replicating itself. So it starts replicating its DNA, its proteins, its organelles, and everything else. And it goes through mitosis to go from 1 cell to 2 cells, 2 cells to 4 cells, 4 cells to 8 cells, 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on and so forth, right? So if we only rely on that replication process, then every cell in the body is going to be exactly identical to that initial zygote, right? And that's not what we want. That's not what development is about. Development is not about just making more and more and more cells. That is growth. That is not development. So development involves a process called differentiation. So what differentiation is all about is the cells, as they are produced, start to specialize over time. They turn on certain genes, they turn off certain genes, so that they become very, very good at doing what they're supposed to do. They become very good at their job, but of course incapable of doing certain other things, which is okay because that's not their job. Your brain cells are not capable of pumping blood. That's okay because that's what the heart does. The brain doesn't need to worry about that. So as both growth and differentiation occur, we end up as a 30 trillion cell adult that has blood cells, nerve cells, muscle cells, glandular cells, skin cells, and so on and so forth. We have all these different cells in the body that all do completely different things, and that's okay. We don't need every cell in our body being capable of doing everything. It's just not feasible. So growth and repair, so you can see growth in this left figure here. Growth and repair are attained mostly through the dividing of existing stem cells that either increase the number of existing cells or replace those that are lost or damaged. So in terms of growth, you're not really having much growth happening as an adult. Anytime mitosis happens in our bodies, assuming all of us taking this class are adults, which I think is a fair assumption, growth is only going to really happen in kind of developing toddlers and prepubescents, right? So for us, the only time mitosis is going to occur is if we injure ourselves, right? So anytime repair needs to occur. So if you cut yourself or something else, mitosis will occur to replace the cells that were lost. But in order for something like that to occur, you need stem cells, which is a topic that we will discuss, I believe, in Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. So look forward to that. Okay, so that's going to do it for this particular video. Please join us next time, and we will start talking about what do we need to be alive? What are the requirements for life as a human? So I will go ahead and sign off for now, and I will see you next time.